Alrighty, now perhaps one of the most important lessons of this unit and of this course is about the central limit theorem and why we check these conditions for inference. Now, inference is just the ability to make generalizations, make predictions based on available data to us. And so before we actually get into the notes, I just want to look at some different types of distributions here. So suppose here's my population, because remember, we're looking at the population, we're looking at the sample, and then we're looking at the sampling distribution. So the population is the truth, right? This is the group of people, the collection of items that contains the truth parameter, the mu or the proportion. And then the distribution of the sample, the one we describe, is when we take one random sample, what characteristics are in that sample. And then from there, if I keep taking repeated samples of that same sample size, and I take all possible samples of size n, I would end up with the sampling distribution, which is the distribution of all possible values that describe the sample statistic. And remember, statistics can be things that are not just the sample proportion and the sample mean. This could also be the sample standard deviation, the median, the range, the IQR, the quartiles, etc. So let's suppose here that I have a normal distribution, and I want to take, let's say, 5 samples. So I'm going to take the means here. So I want to take just a random sample here of 5 objects. And so here's my population. Here's my data of 5. And then within those 5, the average falls about right here. So I'm going to take another random sample of size 5. And then again. And let's say I take 5 more. Okay, so notice these 2 colors here. The pink represents my median, but here, or actually, sorry, the pink is my population parameter. So notice that the mean of this distribution falls right here. Well, right now my mean is a little bit lower than it, and we can see there's some left skewness to it. So if I keep taking samples, notice that, okay, now the spread is decreasing. We're starting to see a singular peak, and it's becoming more symmetric. But aside from those things, look at that our sample is now starting to closely approximate our population. So if I keep taking many samples, we're going to get closer and closer. Now, right now I'm at 208 samples. Let's just take 10,000. Let's take another 10,000. And if we keep doing this, we notice that now at 110,000 samples taken, my distribution appears symmetric, and our sample mean does a good job of approximating our population mean. Well, here's a fun fact for you. Anytime you sample from a normal distribution, the distribution of the sample will always be normal, not approximately normal. It will be normal. So that's your fun fact of the day. Now, that's if we take from a normal population. Let's suppose we take from a uniform population. And remember that in a uniform distribution, all observations are equally likely. So I'm going to take a sample of 5, and the average of these 5 comes down here. And we'll take another random sample. And you'll notice that here in my distribution of my sample, it's going to also appear uniform. I mean, granted, there might be some gaps and outliers, so TBD. But here we go. We'll keep taking. So let's take 5. Okay, 5 again. So again, we notice there's a lot of variability. There's some gaps. There's some missing data. And right now, our sample mean is not closely approximating the population mean. But again, I'll take 10,000 and another 10,000, and I'll keep doing so. And you'll notice that while the variation is large, again, our sample means now closely approximate the population mean. So it's like, regardless of the population, as long as we keep taking more and more samples, we'll get a better idea. Now, it's not necessarily the number of samples, but perhaps it's the number of observations in the sample. So let me go ahead and up this. Let's go to 20. So back to let's go skewed. So we can see we're heavily skewed to the right, and I'll keep taking some samples, and yeah, like there's still going to be some slight skew in my sampling distribution because the original population is skewed. Well, now let me just increase the sample size here. And okay, we're noticing that maybe the skew is not as sufficient. So let's take a look at this again. So let's start very small. I only take 2, take the mean, take 2, take the mean. So I'm going to keep doing this. And again, we can see that small sample sizes are going to incorporate that skewness. Okay, so now let me up it to sample size of 10. Oh, okay. Again, very exciting watching me click buttons. So I'm going to keep taking this again. And there's still some skewness. It's looking more symmetric, but I can kind of see that tail to the right. Okay, so let me take sample sizes of 20. All right, let's take 5, 5. Again, you're going to keep seeing that skewness. Now let's see 25. But it looks like each time that I take a sample with larger sample sizes, that skewness is being reduced. But again, if I just continue to take a large amount of samples and I increase the sample size, I'm good to go. And that's the idea here of the central limit theorem. If we draw an SRS of size n from a population with mean mu and standard deviation sigma, the CLT, central limit theorem, says that if our sample size is sufficiently large, the sampling distribution of the sample mean is going to be approximately normal. And the idea here is that if we do have any unusual features, any peaks, any gaps, any outliers, if I keep repeatedly sampling, those samples will be the sampling distribution will take into account those extreme features and they'll be balanced out. So the CLT basically says that as long as we have a sufficiently large sample size, our distribution is going to be approximately normal. And that'll lead us into the conditions here shortly. Now, how large of a sample size is needed for the sampling distribution to be close to normal depends on the distribution of the population, because it could be binomial, it could be geometric, it could be skewed right, skewed left, uniform, unimodal, who knows. Now, more observations are required if the population distribution is far from normal. But as we saw, if the population is normal, then the distribution of the sample will always be normal. But our safe bet here will be that n is at least 30. And this is referred to as the normality or the large sample condition. Not the large counts, but the large sample. Because now we're starting to look at means. We're looking at quantitative data, not categorical data. Now, why have we been checking these conditions? Well, let's think about it. If I use randomness, this reduces the bias in a sample, and it makes my sample more representative of the population that I would like to learn more about. So if I have a random sample, the reason I needed the random sample condition is because it allows me to generalize to the population of interest. Whereas if I use random assignment, this allows me to infer cause and effect about the treatment or about the, I guess the treatment, we only use random assignment when we're looking at experimental design. So the random condition helps me to either generalize or infer cause and effect, and this is so that we can have a representative sample, representative results. Now, the independence condition, suppose here, right, this is the 10% condition. So we, remember, talked about independence between samples, but this is more specific to independence within a sample. And the reason we use the 10% condition is so that the degree of dependence is negligible, meaning that if I'm taking these small samples, well, this small sample won't influence this small sample, and vice versa over here. So if I'm sampling from this population and I'm taking small samples, each of those samples will give me a p-hat, which I'll plot to make the sampling distribution of the sample proportion. Same thing goes here for the sample mean. And then, of course, the difference between samples is that obviously I'm going to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So I wouldn't compare a population proportion to a mean. I would need to compare two proportions or two means. But we can see here, if there's two separate samples, then this blue circle, this sample won't influence this sample at all. And then within the respective populations, this blue won't influence this one, and so forth. And so we use the 10% to ensure that sampling without replacement is okay. We're not going to have any overlap. We'll have equal representation. And theoretically, we aren't changing things too much. We're getting those representative samples, and we won't have any overlap. All right, now the last one is the normality condition. We need this for the shape of our sampling distribution because we've only really learned how to do calculations with the normal model. Now we did learn a few different probability techniques, but as far as distributions go, we've mostly looked at normal, binomial, and geometric. So if I'm using categorical data, I will check large counts. But if I'm using quantitative data, I have to check that either the original population is normal, because again, mu and sigma, or using the CLT, that my sample size is at least 30. And the reason that I check either one of these is so that I can assume the sampling distribution of p-hat of x bar is approximately normal. Thus, I can use a normal model to calculate correct probabilities. So these three conditions give us the building blocks of inference. We need these three conditions to be met so that we're able to have valid results. So some unbiased estimators of their respective populations. We've talked that the sample proportion closely estimates the population proportion, that the sample mean closely estimates the population mean, and that the sample standard deviation closely estimates the population standard deviation. So we have these ideas here. Well, let's take a look at an example here. For a sample of 42 rabbits, the mean weight is 5 pounds and the standard deviation is 3 pounds. So I have my sample size, my sample average, and my sample standard deviation. Does the empirical rule apply? So let's look here. If I were to assume this population is normal and I'd go the 1, 2, 3 standard deviations, I'd have this, but in the context of this question, I'm looking at weights. And if I look at weights, I actually can't have negative weight, unfortunately. So my weights are going to be over here in this direction. So because we do not meet the criteria of the empirical rule, we probably cannot assume that this is a normal population. So the shape of the distribution of the sample, well, I'd hope you'd recognize this shape. We can see the tail is going towards the higher values. That would look something like skewed right. All right, but that is the distribution of the sample. That is one time of this one group of 42 rabbits. Now, suppose we took all possible samples of these 42 rabbits, then what would be the shape of the sampling distribution? Then we would say something like the shape is approximately, I don't know why my handwriting is so sloppy, sorry y'all, is approximately normal by the CLT. And our reason being, since the original population, the original sample had 42 rabbits in it, and 42 is definitely greater than or equal to 30. So now our shape of our sampling distribution is approximately normal because we saw that from the CLT, from that simulator. The more and more samples and the larger the samples, again, those effects of outliers and other unusual features get balanced out. So we can assume that it's approximately normal by the CLT. Now, I did forget context here, but I hope you all can forgive me. And lastly, what is the difference between the distribution of the sample and the sampling distribution? Well, the distribution of the sample we know was one time, right? I took one sample and I described that one sample. But the sampling distribution is all possible samples. And let's be honest here, in theory land, yes, you would get all possible samples, but realistically, you can't get all possible samples, but you can get a large amount of samples. So we'll assume that the sampling distribution can be closely approximated by a large amount of samples here. Alrighty, so a few concept checks here. The CLT states which of the following for a sample size of n. So go ahead and look over that one. Which of the following are true? Pause the video, take a screenshot, look at your notes. And lastly, here we go. So I'm going to give you, I don't know, however much time you need. So go ahead and pause the video now, and then we will look back at our answers here shortly. So go ahead now, take some time to work through these questions. Alrighty, so we'll go over the answers in class if you need more clarity, but here we are. And I'll just let you look over these. Hopefully you can find your mistakes. And if you can't find your mistakes, just ask questions during class time, and we will gladly get through them. So we've got, yeah. There we go. All right, so that's a little bit more about the central limit theorem and the conditions for inference. And in the next few lessons, we are going to look at sampling distributions for means now. So now we're looking at quantitative data. Again, we're just going to use these formulas here to construct the sampling distribution of those statistics. So stay tuned for more about sampling distributions.